I still remember the crack of my father's hand against my 8-year-old daughter's face. That night, my own mother taped my mouth shut to silence my screams, and my sister just smirked. That was the night my family showed me their true faces, and it shattered my world forever. My name is Jennifer, and this is the story of how I watched the people I loved most reveal a monstrous cruelty I never imagined. This is how I fought back when everyone told me to stay silent, and how justice became the coldest, most satisfying dish I ever served. The evening had started normally enough, or at least what passed for normal in my family. My husband, Marcus, and I loaded our two precious girls, 8-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Lily, into our Honda Civic for the 30-minute drive to my parents' house in suburban Connecticut. We'd been married for 11 years, high school sweethearts who married young. Emma was chattering excitedly about her upcoming school play, while little Lily hummed along to the radio, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Marcus squeezed my hand as we pulled into the familiar driveway, where my sister Ashley's pristine white SUV already sat parked. My parents' colonial-style home always looked picture-perfect from the outside, immaculate lawn, freshly painted shutters. But I knew deep down that the rot lived inside, though I'd spent years desperately pretending otherwise. My father, Richard, owned a successful insurance brokerage, a pillar of the community, while my mother, Patricia, had painstakingly crafted her identity around being the perfect homemaker and tireless community volunteer. Ashley, 3 years younger than my 32 years, had married a cardiovascular surgeon and produced 2 boys, Tyler and Brandon, who in our parents' eyes could apparently do no wrong. Dinner passed without major incident, but the familiar patterns were already tightening their invisible grip. I watched my father heap praise on Ashley's eldest son, Tyler, for his soccer achievements, barely glancing at Emma's straight-A report card. My mother, I noticed, fawned over Ashley's 6-year-old Brandon, calling him her little prince, as she slipped him extra dessert. When Lily accidentally spilled a tiny bit of milk, my mother's lips tightened into that thin, dangerous line I knew so well, but she said nothing, not yet. After we ate, the kids scattered to the basement playroom, their joyful shouts temporarily masking the tension, while the adults lingered over coffee. Ashley, naturally, launched into a detailed monologue about her recent kitchen renovation, showing off photos of gleaming marble countertops and custom cabinetry on her phone. My mother cooed appropriately at each image. When I tried to mention that Marcus had just received a significant promotion at his accounting firm, my father cut me off mid-sentence, turning his full attention to Ashley to ask about her husband's latest research paper. It was always like this. Always. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus caught my eye and subtly tapped his watch. Both girls had school the next morning, and Lily's bedtime was fast approaching. I nodded, smoothing down my sweater. "We should probably get going," I said, trying to keep my voice light, to diffuse the inevitable. "It's getting late for the girls." My father's expression shifted instantly, like storm clouds rolling across a clear sky. His jaw clenched, and he set his coffee mug down with enough force that liquid sloshed over the rim. "Get your kids and go home," he barked, his voice sudden thunder in the quiet dining room. I froze, heat flooding my cheeks. Marcus stood up beside me, his hand finding the small of my back, a silent anchor. "Dad, I was just saying. I heard what you said. Get them and leave." His eyes were hard, cold in a way that made my stomach clench. From the corner of my vision, I saw Tyler and Brandon still running around the living room, their laughter echoing through the house, oblivious. "Ashley's kids are still playing," Marcus said carefully, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite his career in finance. My mother turned her sharp, icy gaze on my husband. "Ashley's boys are welcome to stay as long as they want. Jennifer knows when she's overstayed her welcome." The words hit like a physical slap. I'd heard variations of it my whole life, but never quite so blatant, so publicly humiliating. Ashley, meanwhile, examined her perfectly manicured nails, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I walked toward the basement stairs on shaking legs, Marcus close behind. My daughters were building an elaborate blanket fort with their cousins, all 4 children's faces flushed with joy and exertion. "Emma, Lily, time to go," I called down, trying to keep my voice steady, to betray none of the fear coiling in my gut. "Already?" Emma's face fell. "But Mom, we just started this game." "I know, sweetie, but it's a school night." Tyler and Brandon continued playing without pause, knowing instinctively that the rules were different for them. Lily climbed the stairs slowly, her rabbit dragging behind her. Emma followed, disappointment radiating from every single step. We reached the main floor to find my father standing with his arms crossed, blocking the path to the front door. My mother hovered behind him, a dark shadow, and Ashley had positioned herself on the sofa, like an audience member settling in for a show. "Please, Grandpa, could I stay a bit longer?" Emma asked, her voice small and hopeful. The change in my father was instantaneous and terrifying. His face flushed a dark, mottled red, veins standing out in his neck. Before I could even process what was happening, he lunged forward, grabbing Emma by her upper arm, yanking her forward with such force that she stumbled. "You ungrateful little brat!" he shouted, and his open palm connected with Emma's cheek with a crack that seemed to split the world open. Time fractured into horrible crystalline shards. Emma's scream, Lily's matching shriek of pure terror, my own voice rising in a wordless howl as I rushed forward, Marcus's furious shout of, "What the hell?" My father hit Emma again, this time backhanding her across the face. Blood appeared at her split lip, bright red against her pale skin. She tried to curl away from him, but his grip was iron. "Stop it! Stop it!" I was screaming, trying to get between them, my hands reaching for my daughter, my baby, my Emma. Suddenly my mother was there, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years. She grabbed me from behind, one arm wrapping around my torso, yanking me backward. I thrashed against her, screaming for her to let me go, to stop this madness. My mother produced a roll of packing tape from seemingly nowhere. Later, I would learn she'd had it in the kitchen, ready for some household project. But in that moment it became a weapon. She pressed her hand over my mouth and nose, cutting off my screams, and wrapped the tape around my head 3, 4, 5 times. The adhesive caught in my hair, pulled at my skin. I couldn't breathe through my nose, and with my mouth sealed, pure blinding panic flooded my system. "There," my mother said, her voice chillingly calm, almost satisfied. "That's better." I bucked against her hold, trying to break free, but she was stronger than she looked. Years of yoga and tennis had kept her deceptively fit. She forced me down onto the dining room floor, her knee in my back, her hands pinning my wrists. Through the gray, oxygen-starved edges of my vision, I watched my father continue to hit Emma. Each blow felt like it was landing on my own body. My daughter's cries were weakening, and all I could do was make muffled, desperate sounds behind the tape. Marcus lunged forward, but my father rounded on him. "You want some too? Get out of my house. You're hitting a child." Marcus's voice cracked with fury and disbelief. "I'm calling the police." Ashley rose from the sofa, moving to stand between Marcus and the door. Her smile was wide now, genuinely delighted. "If she won't shut up, seal her like trash," she said, gesturing toward me on the floor. Honestly, Jennifer always was so dramatic. Emma probably deserved it, just like her mother always did. The words were knives, but they confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. This wasn't an aberration. This was who they were, who they'd always been. I'd just been too desperate for their hollow love to see it clearly. Marcus pulled out his phone, and my father finally released Emma, who crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Lily was screaming in the corner, hands clamped over her ears, her beloved rabbit forgotten on the ground. "Go ahead and call," my father sneered, his breathing heavy. "Call the cops. I'll tell them Jennifer attacked me first, that her kid was out of control. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected businessman or some hysterical woman?" Marcus's hand shook, but he started dialing anyway. Ashley moved fast, snatching the phone from his hand and throwing it against the wall where it shattered into pieces. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I managed to roll onto my side despite my mother's crushing weight. Through tears and the tape cutting into my face, I could see Emma. Her cheek was already swelling, her lip bleeding, her eyes unfocused. I made desperate, animal sounds behind the tape, trying to reach her. My mother leaned down close to my ear, her voice a chilling hiss. "Don't move. She deserves all the beating. You were always too soft on those girls. This is what happens when children don't learn respect." The room filled with their laughter, my father's deep guffaws, Ashley's high-pitched giggles, my mother's satisfied chuckles. They were laughing at Emma's pain, at my helplessness, at the perfect family tableau they'd shattered and reassembled into something monstrous. Marcus dropped to his knees beside Emma, checking her over with shaking hands. "We need to get her to a hospital," he said, his voice thick. My father waved dismissively. "She's fine. Just a little discipline. You people are too sensitive." "Discipline?" Marcus's voice rose to a shout. "You beat her. You assaulted a child." "My house, my rules," my father said coldly. "You don't like it, there's the door." Somehow Marcus got both girls toward the exit. He shot me an agonized look, clearly torn between helping me and protecting our daughters. I tried to nod, tried to tell him through my eyes that he needed to get the girls out, get them safe. My mother finally released me once they were gone, ripping the tape off my face with one quick, painful pull. I gasped for air, my lungs burning, my face raw where the adhesive had been. She stood over me, looking down with something close to disgust. "You always did make everything about you," she said. "Emma needed to learn her place, just like you needed to learn yours." I got to my feet on trembling legs. My father had returned to his chair, calmly sipping his coffee as if nothing had happened. Ashley was already texting on her phone, probably telling her husband some sanitized version of events. "You hit my daughter," I said, my voice thin and breaking. "You beat a child." I disciplined a disrespectful grandchild, my father corrected. Something her parents clearly haven't managed to do. I wanted to scream, to rage, to hurt them the way they'd hurt Emma. But I was outnumbered, shaking with shock, and utterly alone in that house. Instead, I walked to the door, my steps unsteady. "Don't bother coming back," my mother called after me. "Not until you're ready to apologize and teach your daughters proper manners." I left without answering, got into my car where Marcus had already buckled both girls into their seats. Emma was crying softly. Lily was hiccuping through her tears. And Marcus looked like he might be sick. His phone was destroyed, but mine was in my purse. I pulled it out with numb fingers and took photos of Emma's injuries in the driveway light. Her cheek, her lip, the finger-shaped bruises already forming on her arm. The drive to the emergency room passed in a blur. Hospital lights, concerned nurses, a doctor who took one look at Emma and asked very pointed questions about what happened. I told the truth, every word of it, while a social worker took notes. More photos were taken, this time by professionals with better cameras and documentation protocols. Marcus gave his statement separately. Our stories matched because we were telling the truth. The social worker assured us that a report would be filed with Child Protective Services, and the police would be contacted. Emma required 3 stitches in her lip. The doctor said she likely had a mild concussion and should be monitored closely. They gave us care instructions, information packets on trauma counseling for children, and a follow-up appointment card. We took our daughters home around midnight. I stayed awake all night watching Emma sleep, checking on her every hour like the doctor had instructed, looking for signs of worsening symptoms. Lily crawled into Emma's bed sometime around 3 a.m., and they curled around each other like they used to as toddlers, seeking comfort in proximity. Marcus sat beside me in the darkness. "We're pressing charges," he said quietly. "Criminal charges. I don't care if he's your father." I nodded. The woman I'd been that morning, who still harbored some desperate, foolish hope of family reconciliation, was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that some bridges needed to burn. The police came the next day to take our statements. They photographed Emma's injuries again, took copies of the hospital records. Within 48 hours, my father was arrested and charged with assault and battery on a child. My mother was charged as an accessory and with unlawful restraint. Ashley faced charges for interfering with an emergency communication when she destroyed Marcus's phone. My father's lawyer, a golf buddy, called me directly, his voice dripping with condescension. "Jennifer, this has gone too far. Drop the charges, and we can all move past this little family squabble." "A little family squabble?" I repeated, my voice deadly calm. "Your client beat my 8-year-old daughter so badly she needed stitches and has a concussion. My mother assaulted me and held me down while it happened. There is no moving past this. Your father is a pillar of the community. This will destroy his reputation." Good. I hung up. The calls kept coming, from family, friends, from distant relatives who'd somehow heard. They all had the same message. Family is family. Forgiveness is noble. I was being vindictive. Think of the embarrassment. Couldn't we handle this privately? I blocked every number that came at me with that narrative. This wasn't a private family matter. This was a crime, and I would see it treated as such. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, my father was released on bail with a restraining order preventing him from contacting me, Marcus, or either of our daughters. My mother and Ashley had similar restrictions. The calls I didn't block were from a lawyer I'd hired within days of the assault. Her name was Rebecca Chong, and she specialized in family law and personal injury cases. She listened to my story with a sharp, focused intensity, taking meticulous notes. "We're filing a civil suit," she said when I finished, "against all 3 of them. Assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and for your mother specifically, false imprisonment. We're going to hit them where it hurts." "Their wallets," I said. "Exactly." Rebecca's smile was fierce. "Criminal charges are important, but they don't compensate you for Emma's medical bills, her therapy costs, the trauma your family experienced. We're going to make sure they pay for every bit of damage they caused." The civil suit was filed 2 weeks after the criminal charges. We were asking for $250,000 in damages, plus legal fees and ongoing therapy costs. Rebecca had structured it to maximize pain, targeting my parents' retirement accounts, their home equity, my father's business assets. My father's insurance company sent a settlement offer within days. $25,000 if we dropped everything, criminal and civil. Rebecca laughed when she showed me the letter. "That's an insult," she said. "We're not negotiating. We're going to trial." But the criminal trial came first. The prosecution built their case methodically. They had Emma's testimony, given in a child-friendly interview room with stuffed animals and gentle questions. They had my testimony and Marcus's. They had the hospital records, the photos, the social worker's notes, They had the 911 call Marcus had managed to make from his car after we left, his voice shaking as he reported what had happened. My father's defense strategy was predictable. Deny, minimize, blame. Emma had been misbehaving. I'd exaggerated the injuries. It was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by oversensitive parents. My father took the stand in his best suit, playing the role of the confused patriarch whose reasonable discipline had been criminalized. The jury didn't buy it. After 3 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all charges. My father was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though with good behavior, he'd likely serve around 16 to 18 months. My mother got a 6-month suspended sentence plus probation. Ashley received probation and community service for her role. The judge's words echoed in the courtroom. What happened in your home that night was not discipline. It was violence against a defenseless child, enabled and facilitated by adults who should have protected her. The court takes these crimes seriously, as should all members of our community. I watched my father's face crumble as the bailiff led him away in handcuffs. My mother sobbed dramatically in her seat, though I noticed she managed not to smudge her makeup. Ashley stared straight ahead, her expression blank, her social media perfect world cracking at the seams. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sadness, just a cold, empty space where my family used to live. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories are coming. The civil trial proceeded 3 months later. Rebecca was brilliant, painting a picture of systematic favoritism, emotional abuse spanning years, culminating in that night of violence. She brought in Emma's therapist, who testified about the nightmares, the anxiety, the fear of older men that my daughter now carried. She brought in my own therapist, whom I'd started seeing in the aftermath, who spoke about complex trauma and family dynamics. During the trial, something unexpected happened, a revelation that chilled me to the bone. Rebecca had issued subpoenas for my parents' financial records, and what we discovered was staggering. My father had set up trust funds for Ashley's boys years ago, each containing over $100,000. Meanwhile, Emma and Lily had nothing. Not a single savings bond, not a college fund contribution, nothing. The disparity was documented, undeniable, and it painted a picture of discrimination that went far beyond one terrible night. It was an intentional, calculated exclusion. Rebecca also uncovered emails between my mother and Ashley, dozens of them spanning years, where they discussed me in the most vicious terms. My mother called me the disappointment, and complained that I'd married beneath our social standing by choosing Marcus, who came from a working-class background. Ashley referred to my daughters as Jennifer's little burdens, and joked about how they'd never measure up to her superior gene pool. One email, sent just 3 days before the assault, was particularly damning. My mother had written to Ashley, "Sunday dinner will be interesting. Jennifer is bringing those girls again. I wish she'd understand they're not as welcome as your boys. Maybe we need to make it more obvious." Ashley's response, "Give it time. She'll get the message eventually. And if not, well, there are other ways to make our preferences clear." The jury heard all of it. They saw the financial records, read the emails, listened to testimony from childhood friends of mine who described decades of differential treatment. One woman, my best friend from high school named Kelly, testified about a birthday party when I was 12. My parents had thrown Ashley an elaborate Sweet 16 with a live band and 200 guests. For my 16th birthday, they'd taken me to a chain restaurant and complained about the cost the entire time. The defense tried to argue that parental preference wasn't illegal, that parents were entitled to feel differently about different children. Rebecca dismantled that argument methodically. This wasn't about hurt feelings, she explained. This was about a pattern of devaluation so severe that it enabled violence. When you teach a child that some grandchildren matter more than others, when you demonstrate through money and attention that some lives have less value, you create the conditions where abuse becomes possible. My father's lawyer, the golf buddy, tried to cross-examine me. He asked why I continued bringing my children around if I felt they were treated poorly. It was a trap question designed to make me look complicit or mercenary. Because I kept hoping my parents would change, I said, my voice steady. Because I wanted my daughters to have grandparents. Because I thought family love was supposed to be unconditional. And I kept believing that if I was patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, they'd eventually see my children the way they saw Ashley's. I was wrong. The lawyer pushed harder, suggesting I was motivated by greed, that this lawsuit was about money rather than justice. Rebecca objected, but I answered anyway. My daughter needed stitches in her face. She has scars, physical and emotional, that she'll carry forever. No amount of money changes that. But what money can do is pay for therapy, for medical care, for the security measures we needed to install in our home because my children are now afraid of surprise visitors. It can ensure that Emma and Lily have resources my parents deliberately withheld from them, while lavishing everything on their preferred grandchildren. If that's greed, then I'm guilty. The courtroom was silent after that. Even the defense attorney seemed to realize he'd miscalculated. We won. The jury awarded us $315,000, more than we'd even asked for, plus legal fees, plus a structured settlement for Emma's ongoing therapy needs that would continue until she turned 18. My parents' appeals were denied. They had to sell their house to cover the judgment. My father's business took a massive hit as the local newspapers covered the trial. Clients left, his partners distanced themselves, and eventually the firm dissolved. Their retirement, their nest egg, their comfortable future, all gone. The fallout extended far beyond financial ruin. My parents had been prominent members of their country club, regular fixtures at charity galas and community events. My mother had chaired several nonprofit boards. Within weeks of the verdict, every position was quietly rescinded. The country club didn't officially revoke their membership, but the dues suddenly became too expensive for them to maintain. Invitations dried up. Their social circle, built over 40 years, evaporated like morning dew. I heard through Kelly that my mother had tried to attend her book club meeting about 6 months after the trial. The women were polite but cold, and nobody spoke to her during the social hour. She never returned. My father's golf buddies stopped returning his calls. The lawyer who defended him sent a bill for services rendered and never spoke to him again. The local newspaper ran a follow-up piece on the case, interviewing child welfare advocates about the prevalence of favoritism-based abuse in families. My parents weren't named in this article, but everyone in town knew who it was about. The reporter had done their homework, speaking with former employees of my father's firm who described his volatile temper, his tendency to demean people he considered beneath him. One woman described how he'd fired her for requesting maternity leave, calling her a drain on company resources. These stories emboldened others. More former employees came forward with complaints about hostile work environments, discrimination, verbal abuse. While the statute of limitations had passed for most legal action, the court of public opinion rendered its own verdict. My father's reputation, which he valued above almost everything, lay in tatters. Ashley's situation deteriorated just as dramatically. Her surgeon husband, Dr. Cameron Whitmore, had initially tried to weather the storm, but his hospital started receiving complaints from patients who didn't want to be treated by someone married to a woman who'd facilitated child abuse. The hospital board suggested he distance himself from the situation. 3 months later he filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The divorce proceedings revealed more ugliness. Cameron's lawyers brought up the fact that Ashley had witnessed and encouraged abuse without intervening. They argued she posed a potential danger to her own children. Child Services conducted an investigation, interviewing Tyler and Brandon separately. What they found troubled them. The boys described their mother's rages, how she'd locked Tyler in his room for hours as punishment, how she told Brandon repeatedly that he was the smart one, while putting Tyler down. The custody battle was brutal. I was called to testify, though I had mixed feelings about it. Those boys were innocent, and despite everything they were still my nephews. But I told the truth about what I'd witnessed over the years. The sharp, cutting comments Ashley made to Tyler whenever he underperformed, the way she compared them constantly, the emotional manipulation and conditional love. Cameron won primary custody. Ashley got supervised visitation only. I heard she'd moved to a small apartment in a less expensive town, taking a job as a receptionist at a dental office. The woman who'd lived in a 6-bedroom colonial with a Mercedes in the driveway now took the bus to work and lived in a studio with second-hand furniture. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at their downfall. But another part, the part that still remembered Sunday dinners before they turned poisonous, felt hollow. This was my family, or what remained of it. The destruction was total and irreversible. Marcus worried about me during this period. He'd catch me staring into space, lost in thoughts I couldn't quite articulate. Regrets? He asked one night as we lay in bed. No, I said, and meant it. Just grief, I think. Grieving the family I thought I had, even though they never really existed the way I imagined. He pulled me close. You have a family right here. He was right. Emma was making progress in therapy, slowly rebuilding her sense of safety. Lily had stopped having nightmares about that night. We created routines that felt stable and secure. Friday movie nights, Sunday breakfast where we made pancakes together. Small traditions that were ours alone, untainted by the past. The money from the settlement went into various accounts. Emma's therapy trust was the largest, managed by a financial advisor who ensured she'd have access to treatment as long as she needed it. We set up college funds for both girls, properly funded ones that would give them choices my parents had denied them. The rest went into a general trust that could be used for their needs as they arose. I went back to work 3 months after the trial, returning to my job as a project manager for a marketing firm. My colleagues had followed the case in the news, and their reactions were uniformly supportive. My boss pulled me aside my first day back. Take whatever time you need, she said. And if you need to leave early for therapy appointments or anything else, just go. We've got your back. That support meant everything. I'd been terrified that the publicity would make me a pariah, that people would see me as a troublemaker or someone who'd cause trauma. Instead, I found sympathy and understanding. Several coworkers shared their own stories of family estrangement, of difficult decisions they'd made to protect themselves or their children. One woman, Maria from accounting, told me about cutting off her own mother after years of emotional abuse. People don't understand unless they've lived it, she said over coffee one day. They think because someone gave birth to you, you owe them unlimited chances. But you don't. You owe your children safety. You owe yourself peace. That's what matters. Ashley tried to reach out about 8 months after the trial. She sent an email to my work address, somehow having found it online. The subject line was, "Please read." The email was long, rambling, full of justifications and excuses. She'd been under stress. She hadn't really thought I'd follow through with charges. She'd just been supporting our parents the way a good daughter should. She was sorry if I'd misunderstood her intentions. Could we meet for coffee and talk? I forwarded the email to Rebecca, who added it to our file, then blocked Ashley's address. There was nothing to discuss. No coffee date could erase what she'd done, what she'd said, who she'd revealed herself to be. 2 years after that horrible Sunday, I received a letter. It came to Rebecca's office, addressed to me through her. My mother's handwriting, shaky and uncertain on the envelope. Inside was a rambling apology, full of excuses and self-pity. She was sorry for what happened. My father was sorry too. They'd lost everything. Couldn't I find it in my heart to forgive them? Family was supposed to forgive. They were old now, struggling. Ashley was living in a small apartment, barely making ends meet. Couldn't I help them? The letter went into painful detail about their circumstances. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom rental in a complex near the highway where the walls were thin, and the parking lot flooded when it rained. My father's health insurance from his dissolved business had lapsed, and they were struggling with medical bills. My mother had taken a part-time job at the grocery store, working the register, something she described with particular bitterness as being beneath her station. She wrote about running into former friends at that grocery store, the way they'd avoid her aisle or rush through checkout without making eye contact. She described the humiliation of using coupons, of budgeting for groceries, of worrying about utility bills, things that millions of people dealt with every day, but that she treated as uniquely tragic because they were happening to her. The most galling part was her insistence that they'd already paid enough. The criminal sentences, the civil judgment, the social ostracism. Surely that was sufficient punishment for what she termed a mistake in judgment. She actually used that phrase, a mistake in judgment, as if beating a child was equivalent to choosing the wrong paint color or making a bad investment. My father had added a postscript in his cramped handwriting. "You were always so sensitive, Jennifer." I may have been too harsh, but it came from a place of wanting to instill discipline. Your generation is too soft on children. Still, for the sake of peace, I'm willing to apologize. Let's put this behind us. Willing to apologize, as if forgiveness was a transaction, and he was offering to meet me halfway. As if too harsh was a reasonable characterization of what he'd done. As if peace was something we could achieve by simply choosing to forget. The letter ended with a plea. They were begging for mercy, for reconciliation, for financial assistance. My father's health was declining. My mother was drowning in bills. They needed me. I read the letter once, then fed it into Rebecca's office shredder and watched it turn to confetti. No response. Rebecca asked. No response, I confirmed. Emma was thriving now. The nightmares had decreased. She'd found a wonderful therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. And slowly, carefully, my daughter was learning to feel safe again. She joined an art class and discovered a talent for painting. Her latest piece hung on our refrigerator, a bright, colorful garden full of flowers and butterflies with a small girl in the center smiling. Lily was too young to remember many details of that night, though she'd had her own therapy journey. She was cautious around loud noises and sudden movements, but she was resilient. Both my girls were resilient in ways I wish they never had to be. Marcus and I went to couples therapy too, working through the trauma of watching helplessly as someone hurt our child. Our marriage survived, grew stronger, even, forged in the fire of shared purpose and protection. We celebrated our 17th anniversary quietly, just the two of us, grateful for what we built together. A year later, another letter arrived. This time from Ashley, her tone more desperate. She'd heard about the trust fund for the girls. Surely there was enough to spare some for her boys, her nephews. They were family too. I burned that letter in our backyard fire pit and roasted marshmallows over the ashes. Emma and Lily helped, laughing as the flames danced. Who was the letter from? Emma asked, her face orange in the firelight. Nobody important, I said, and meant it. My father died in prison from a heart attack 16 months into his sentence, his body giving out before his release date. I didn't attend his funeral, Neither did Marcus or the girls. I sent flowers with no card, a final acknowledgement that something had existed and now was gone. My mother reached out through a cousin, asking if the girls wanted to see their grandmother. I declined on their behalf. The cousin pressed, talking about forgiveness and healing and family bonds. I reminded her about the tape over my mouth, the knee in my back, the words she deserves all the beating. Some bonds once broken should stay broken. The civil settlement money continued to grow in the trust, wisely invested. Emma started talking about college, about becoming a therapist herself to help other kids who'd experienced trauma. Lily wanted to be a veterinarian, surrounded by animals who gave uncomplicated love. We built a new life, the four of us. We celebrated holidays with Marcus's family, who had been horrified by what happened, and showered our girls with the grandparent love they deserved. We made friends, built community, created traditions that had nothing to do with the people who had hurt us. I stopped having the dreams where I was pinned down, helpless, watching harm come to those I loved. I stopped flinching when the phone rang or a letter arrived. The constant vigilance, the waiting for the next attack, it faded gradually, replaced by something steadier. 6 years after that Sunday dinner, Ashley showed up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby where she stood looking haggard and desperate, aged beyond her years. "Jennifer," she started, and I held up a hand. "No. But I don't care what you need." My voice was calm, measured. "You watched a child get beaten. You mocked her mother's pain. You suggested I be sealed like trash. I owe you nothing. We're sisters," she tried. "No," I said simply. "We share DNA. That's all." Security escorted her out when she wouldn't leave voluntarily. I went back to my desk, my hand steady, and finished my workday. That evening I went home to my family, to dinner around our table, to laughter and safety and love. My mother lives in a subsidized senior apartment now, her health failing, most of her friends from the old life having drifted away. I know this from the cousin who occasionally still tries to guilt me into reconciliation. Each time I politely decline and remind her that I'm not interested in updates. The whispers still happen sometimes in my old hometown. I hear them third hand.